The Massachusetts airman accused of leaking classified military documents will stay in custody for at least another 2 weeks. A detention hearing scheduled for this morning for Jack Teixeira has been postponed for that amount of time. He appeared in a federal courtroom briefly this morning as the judge approved that postponement. That was about an hour ago. The 21-year-old was taken into custody last Thursday, as you see in that video, at his home over in North Dighton, Massachusetts. Now in court on Friday, Teixeira was officially charged under the Espionage Act with unauthorized retention of classified and national defense information. I want to bring in an expert to help us break all of this down. Neama Rahmani is a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Thank you so much for taking the time here to join us.
Hi, Josh. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course. So thank you again for being here. But first off here, is it surprising with all we've seen about this case to see a postponement like this of the detention hearing that could have allowed him to leave, I guess, jail there?
Well, it's not surprising. His defense lawyers clearly think they need more time to prepare for this hearing. Normally, you have detention hearings within 3 to 5 days of a defendant's initial appearance in court. And what the government will argue if they want to detain someone is say that they are a risk of flight or a danger to the community. Those are generally the two bases where you can hold someone without bail.
What happens, generally speaking, during a detention hearing? Is it fairly quick? There's no testimony or anything of that nature, right?
Well, you can't have testimony, especially when you're dealing with surety. So there's multiple types of bonds. So what the government has to prove is that there are no condition or combination of conditions that can ensure that the defendant will appear in court. So sometimes what defense attorneys will put on, will say family members that the defendant can live with, that can guarantee his appearances. There's multiple types of potential bonds in federal cases. There's a signature bond, there's a property bond, or there's a cash or corporate surety. So if you're dealing with a property bond, someone needs to actually execute a deed of trust to the United States government. Cash or corporate surety, someone needs to put up money. So the court may want to hear testimony from individuals that are going to put up cash or property to keep someone out of federal prison.
And I know you've been following this case very closely, as so many people across the country have been doing the same. Based on what you've seen and your experience here working as a federal prosecutor, is it likely this guy is going to be out of custody or will likely stay in custody there until this possibly goes to trial?
Well, there is a presumption of bond in most cases. Now, there are some types of crimes, for instance, drug trafficking, that there's a presumption of no bond. But even though this is an Espionage Act case and there's a 30-year potential sentence or even a death penalty, I mean, I'm not saying the government's going to pursue that, but this is such a serious offense. On one hand, I think the judge is going to have to weigh that this individual is likely going to spend decades potentially in federal prison. And on the other hand, you're talking about an individual who's 21 years old, who has no criminal history, who was able to get top secret military clearance. So I think it's going to be a toss-up in this type of case. It's not something that you typically see. These types of cases are rarely charged. But if I had to lean one way or the other, I would lean on the government, and I would think that this defendant is going to be detained.
And as you said, he's just 21 years old. Does age play any sort of factor in that?
I mean, it certainly does. I mean, the judge needs to look at the totality of the circumstances. Is someone who's not only young, just a few years removed from high school, he enlisted in the U.S. military, but he's posting this information on video game chat rooms. So that just goes to show, I mean, obviously he's an adult, but he's just a few years removed from being a kid. So I think if their parents or other family members and the judge is comfortable that they have control and he's going to be living somewhere and going to be making his court appearances, I think that's a factor that's going to help him if he is actually granted some sort of bond.
And this case right now, to my knowledge, is considered a federal case. Could it be a court-martial at some point? Could we see the case change altogether?
Absolutely. I mean, he is active duty military, so this is something that military officials, the JAGs, could get involved. They could prosecute him. I mean, the penalties there are even more significant. So this is something that we could see moving forward into court-martial proceedings.
And is it possible this all never actually goes to trial? Could there be some type of settlement here and have everything kind of just end?
I think the chances of settlement in this case are high. And the reason is this: there is an overwhelming amount of evidence. You have that digital footprint where, this defendant is not only, downloading documents, he's posting them on this Discord chat room, and, he's circulating. I mean, it first started with him just posting information, but now that the documents have been posted, some of which were actually modified, it's going to be very difficult to defend this case on the merits if you're his lawyers.
And what happens next after the detention hearing there that'll take place in about 2 weeks or so? What is the next step in all of this?
The next step will either be a preliminary hearing in which the judge has to find probable cause for the case to move forward to a jury trial, or what's likely going to happen is the government will skip that preliminary hearing by going to the grand jury and getting an indictment. If the federal government is able to get that indictment, then we can skip that preliminary hearing phase and set the case for trial.
All right, Neama Rahmani, thank you so much for taking the time here to join us, provide some perspective there from your experience. Is there anything else that you want to add about all of this before I let you go?
Well, this is something that's incredibly unique. And what I would say is it's really a reflection of the post 9/11 intelligence world that we live in. One of the big criticisms that came out of that 9/11 commission was intelligence agencies not sharing data with one another. So you created a situation where now more folks have access to this classified information than you did pre 9/11. But obviously that creates this risk that we're dealing with today, that folks that don't necessarily need access have access and are distributing this information to folks that shouldn't have it.
All right, Neama, thank you again for taking the time to join us.
Thanks for having me, as always.